dear viewers, what a topic to talk on. Recent advances in adenomyosis management. Why did I choose this topic? Because it is such an important subject and nobody really talks about this to the extent that it's almost like cancer. Why do I say that? It's because the amount of pain the woman goes through with adenomyosis and endometriosis, the woman herself understands. Nobody else understands. So let's go ahead without much of time waste and see what we can do about what are the recent advances in adenomyosis management. Adenomyosis, what does that mean? Adeno means glands and meiosis is muscle, defined as a benign invasion of endometrium into the myometrium, producing a diffusely enlarged uterus, non-neoplastic endometrial glands and stroma surrounded by hypertrophic and hyperplastic myometrium. A diagnostic and treatment dilemma for physicians, because it's not cancer but it behaves like cancer. Let's look at what the recent things that we know about it. It's increasingly being diagnosed in young women with infertility and pain or with an abnormal uterine bleeding. A third of these patients need not have any symptoms. On the one side, I say that they have a lot of pain, and I'm telling you also a third of them come to you with adenomyosis with no symptoms. And of course, the risk factor here for the profile is a woman who's aged over 40 years, multiparity, prior to perhaps a cesarean section or a uterine surgery, and she can be diagnosed with adenomyosis at the time of surgery. So therefore, you have all kinds of people landing up with adenomyosis, and believe me, it is almost suicidal in women that have this adenomyosis. So this is the new epidemiological scenario. What could that be? Uniform diagnostic criteria in both histopathology and imaging are the need of the hour. So how do we look at the pathogenesis theories? In the past, we had a lot of theories, whether it was a retrograde menstruation, a stem cell therapy, or whether it was some kind of invasion of the endometrial cells into the myometrium. But whatever may be the pathogenesis, the important etiology here is the movement of the lining of the uterus into the myometrial wall. So what? The reason here is that while the endometrium has that lining which sheds every month and what we call as menstruation coming in through the vagina and onto the sanitary pad, the moment the endometrial cells as lakes get into the myometrium, every time the menstruation occurs, there is no outlet, and because there is no outlet, it sticks inside the muscle fibers, stretches the muscle fibers, and as a result of that, the stretching of these muscle fibers causes pain almost akin to labor pain. So as long as the periods are there and just before the period, you will experience a lot of pain. When does this pain go? The pain goes when the menstruation ends and perhaps a day or two later. Why does this pain go after 2 or 3 days later? Is because the blood that is there inside the myometrium gets clotted and then gets absorbed. But as this goes on and on, the myometrial fibers tend to get hyperplastic, and then there is unequal distribution, that is myohyperplasia, either of the anterior wall or of the posterior wall. So if we now go into the next slide and have a look at all the symptoms. Let's look at the left hand side and have a look at the abnormal uterine bleeding, AUB. It can be either heavy menstrual bleeding, prolonged menstrual bleeding, intermenstrual bleeding, and of course premenstrual spotting. When I say heavy menstrual bleeding, bleeding during the time of periods when you actually change 4 to 5 pads a day to even 6 to 8 pads a day, and also the presence of clots with the bleeding also suggests that the bleeding has been heavy. When you say intermenstrual bleeding, it means that bleeding in between two menstrual cycles, and the prolonged menstrual bleeding is that it just gets into the next menstrual cycle also bleeding and bleeding. So, you do not differentiate between one menses to the next menses. What happens to the next side? What is this gynecological pain? A dysmenorrhea, which is of course painful periods, then a dyspareunia, which means painful sex, and then of course chronic pelvic pain. Chronic pelvic pain is pain that is situated in the pelvis all the time. Now, that is something which is really difficult to actually tolerate, because whatever the woman wants to do, the quality of life is very bad. Even if she wants to go out, she will always think of this pain, and she has been taking a lot of painkillers, trying different painkillers, and mind you, painkillers are not without their side effects. They can affect the kidneys and the liver, and therefore one has to look at this very carefully. Of course, it also can cause infertility, and I'll talk about it later as we go in, and also recurrent miscarriage. This also can go into the neighboring organs like the bladder and the gastrointestinal tract. How does that do? Now, it can cause dysuria, that is painful passing urine, that is maturation, or dysgeusia, which is painful defecation, that is passing stools. So, you have all the kind of problems that you can expect with the adenomyosis. Oh my God, why did I ever get it? What did I do? God, please help me. And these are the things that the woman is going to be telling you. Of course, we talk about infertility pathogenesis. So, why adenomyosis should actually cause infertility? Impairment of the sperm transport, particularly because when you are going to have the sperms traveling from the cervical end through the uterine cavity, the contractions of the uterus is going to be detrimental to the movement of the sperms towards the fallopian tube. The other thing is because of the aberrant uterine contractility and alterations of adhesion molecules, cell proliferation, apoptosis, and free radical metabolism. Then the junctional zone abnormalities. The junctional zone is the zone between the endometrium and the myometrium, and which is normally a very distinct zone. With adenomyosis, that zone is not distinct, it is broken into many places. The gaps that is present there, the arterial supply also gets very jinxed. Then comes the cause of recurrent implantation failure during IVF treatment. So, all these things actually leads to infertility pathogenesis. So, if you were to look at the utopic endometrium on the left hand side, look at all the markers on the left hand side and look at the adenomyotic markers on the right endometrium on the right hand side, and you will see that the markers on the left hand side of the utopic endometrium is different from the right hand, by showing that the interleukin there and the IL, that is the interleukin 16 and the leukocyte inhibiting factor are higher in the adenomyotic endometrium. So, adenomyosis and reproductive failure, they are like a seesaw. You will see that the pregnancy rate and live birth rates on the right hand side trying to push it up, where on the left hand side what is pulling down is the miscarriage rate, the adverse late pregnancy outcomes in terms of preterm birth, small for gestational age, and of course a postpartum hemorrhage. Therefore, adenomyosis can cause catastrophic outcomes, especially even when the woman gets pregnant. So, even when they have adenomyosis, the diagnosis many times is often missed in the woman's health. So, let us have a look as to how do we diagnose adenomyosis. If you look at it, the gold standard here is an invasive histology, and the non-invasive would be the transvaginal ultrasound as well as the MRI. Now, adenomyosis has turned from a histopathological entity into a clinical condition diagnosed by imaging techniques independently of surgical treatment, and that is how we have moved forward in the advancement of diagnosis of adenomyosis. Now look at this histological examination and you will see on the right hand side the cut sections of the uterus to show how differently the uterus looks. Very globular, the uncut section you will see is looking very globular, and when the cut section is seen, you will see how thick the myometrial wall is, and when you actually stain it with the H&E stain, you will see that the muscle fibers are hyperplastic, and also you will see a lot of the lakes that are present inside the myometrium. So the presence of endometrial tissue of more than 2.5 millimeters below the endometrial junction, that is the junctional zone, and thickness of more than 12 mm is important for the diagnosis. So the types are either a diffuse adenomyosis or a focal adenomyoma. So let's have a look at the ultrasound pictures here. You will see the ultrasound findings. Now I know you will say that we are describing this in great detail, but because the ultrasound pictures, the 3D, the 4D imaging has been so good now, that all that we need is a good ultrasound and this diagnosis can be very clear. Now if you look at it, you can have a globular type, or you can have an asymmetrical type, or you can have a cystic form, or you just can have a hyperechoic spots inside the myometrium. So if you look at all these lakes over there, what does it mean? What is the significance? When you look at a globular form, it means it's very diffuse, it's all over the fundus of the uterus, it's equally spaced between the anterior and the posterior walls. Whereas if you look at the asymmetrical one, you will see that it is more on the posterior wall rather than the anterior wall. If you look at the cyst forms, it is very localized to only the posterior wall, but it is only in a small area, and the same thing with the hyperechoic islands. So therefore, even on the pictures, when you actually put this across, the severity also is going to be different. For example, the globular one will be more severe compared to the others. So having a look again at these findings, you will also look at the ultrasound findings, which shows a fan shaped shadowing, also an echogenic subendometrial lines and buds, translesional vascularity, irregular junctional zone and interrupted junctional zone. And the next one would be adenomyosis, where we are looking at direct signs and indirect signs. When we look at the direct signs, we are looking at all the lines and buds, the echogenic islands, we are looking at the cysts, and we are looking at the junctional zones. But of course, if you look at the cystic lesions, you will see the non-cystic and the cystic lesions. If you look layer by layer, you look at the junctional zone, you will also look at the middle of the myometrium, and you look at the outer myometrium. Extent, if you look at, is it only a mild adenomyosis? It will be 25, less than 25%, 25 to 50% will be moderate, and more than 50 will be severe. So if you were to look at a focal or a diffuse, you will be looking at an adenomyoma, which will be a very focal one, or a diffuse one, and another focal one would be on either sides. And of course, these are going to help us to make a decision on how we are going to go for surgery. Let us look at the next slide, which shows us the MRI as a normal study. This is an MRI picture to tell you a T2 weighted image of the uterus displayed in a healthy woman of a reproductive age group at the 3 distinct layers of the uterus. And when you see this, it means that this uterus is absolutely normal. Let's go across to the next uterus, which will show you features of an adenomyosis, a large regular asymmetric uterus, maximum junctional zone of at least 12 millimeters, and punctate high intensity myometrial foci. And if we were to look at this with a thickness of the junctional zone of 8 to 12 millimeters to look for. Now, the MRI also will give you the same thing of focal, multifocal, superficial, symmetrical, asymmetrical, diffuse, symmetrical and asymmetrical. So this can give us a classification on how to go forward and what would the prognosis be and what is the chance of this person getting pregnant. Accuracy of the TVS and the MRI for the non-invasive diagnosis of adenomyosis in terms of sensitivity will be approximately 72 to 77, which is not significant, and specificity of 81 to 89%. The positive likelihood ratio of 3.7 to 6.5, and the negative likelihood ratio of 0.3 to 0.2. So, which means to say that the positive likelihood ratio of diagnosing adenomyosis with MRI is much more definite when compared to the TVS. The other modalities of diagnosing adenomyosis is sonohystrography and hysteroscopy and elastography. And you will see there on the slide, when you do a hysteroscopy, you are going to see inside the uterine cavity the way in which you see the cavity, the red dots inside the cavity, and also the little grooves inside the cavity. The sonohystrography will show you fluid inside the cavity and will also be able to delineate if there are any furrows going into the myometrium. The elastography, of course, will give you a color picture, and you will be able to see this picture on the right hand side. Now, we have to look at management strategies. When I say that the woman has a lot of pain, I am sure all my delegates would want to know what kind of pain management are we going to really do in this case. The pregnancy can come later, but how will we manage the pain? So, the non-surgical, medical and or interventional. These are the three different ways we will need to see as to how do we take this forward. What could be the hormonal management for pain? Can we give her oral contraceptives, danazol, Dynogest, levonorgestrel, intrauterine contraceptive device, GnRH agonist, or anyway SERMs, aromatase inhibitors, ulipristal acetate. Now, that is a lot of pharmacology that I have given you, and I think I should explain that a little bit more. Why do I give oral contraceptive pills? Now, I need to give oral contraceptive pills because I can also inhibit ovulation, but also to be able to prevent the pain. Giving constantly oral contraceptive pills does modify the pain in certain number of patients. So, therefore, putting them on a course of OCPs for over a period of 6 months tends to reduce the pain. But when you give danazol, I think danazol used to be given earlier, but because of the side effects of masculinizing effects, we tend to discontinue treatment with danazol, and so danazol is now in disrepute. We go to Dynogest. Yes, Dynogest is one that we are giving regularly now to patients, a 2 milligram tablet a day, and that is going to be given continuously for these patients for a period of 3 months. The other thing that is given is the levonorgestrel. This can be given as a coil. Levonorgestrel medicated intrauterine contraceptive device. It tends to take the pain away. It tends to decellularize the lining of the uterus, that is the endometrium, and also reduces the pain. This can be kept for as long as about a year or two so that the pain subsides. The other thing that is new in the market today is the ulipristal acetate. This tends to shrink the wall of the uterus as well. This actually was started for fibroids, large fibroids, but now this has also been used for adenomyosis with limited success. The second thing that we have here, which is of course the uterine artery embolization. This has been tried and this has been with limited success, but of course this is quite an invasive procedure and one has to really think about this before you can go ahead and do this. What happens here is that both the uterine arteries are cannulated through the femoral arteries and then they are blocked, and then what happens is that these uterine arteries then get closed and the amount of blood supply to these areas is reduced, therefore the size of the uterus comes down. Another thing that we have here is the magnetic resonance guided focused ultrasound surgery. This is new in the market. It can be done for certain anterior wall adenomyosis, and we have to be careful about the bowels coming in between, but however we must be careful that it cannot be used for all kinds of cases. Select cases certainly have had good success rates with this kind of a treatment. There are of course other surgeries that can be done, particularly those who have completed their family, whether you can go in for an adenomyomectomy, laparoscopic or hysteroscopic. Well, this happens when you have an adenomyoma, that is a very localized kind of adenomyosis, not the diffuse one. So, you can actually remove this like a fibroid. The difference between the fibroid and the adenomyoma is that the fibroid has a pseudocapsule, whereas an adenomyoma does not have a capsule. So, when you remove the adenomyoma, you have to make sure that there is enough of the closing tissue, the surface, so that you can close it properly. Otherwise, you may have a burst uterus if you can't close it properly. So, you have to be very careful when you are taking out the wall of the uterus. You should be able to close the layers of the uterus afterwards. So, when you do a laparoscopic surgery or a hysteroscopic surgery, in the laparoscopic or the laparotomy for an adenomyomectomy, you have to be very trained to do this procedure. The other thing is of course a new technique that had come in the market about a decade ago was the thermal ablation of the myometrium. This was a thermal balloon that was actually placed inside the uterine cavity, and in the uterine cavity hot water was put through, circulated inside the lining of the uterus, and it actually sort of made the endometrium absolutely burnt, literally burnt. This was one way of doing it using thermal, that is the heat energy, and this actually caused a bit of like a menopause, and this actually gave limited success for some time. Some people landed into menopause and some people started bleeding a period of 6 months to about 9 months later. So, this is not actually practiced on a regular basis. So, if you were to look at uterus sparing conservative surgeries, the complete excision of course is an adenomyomectomy or a cystectomy. Partial excision is a cytoreductive surgery and a partial adenomyomectomy. These are all the things that are kept only for very refractory kind of pain which does not respond to pharmacological treatment. And uterine sparing conservative surgeries, it should not be routinely recommended if fertility is desired. It is considered on a case to case basis, and of course, we must be very clear that when we do this kind of surgery, if we are going to try and ask them to conceive, we have to be very careful, because in this sort of situation it's a very high risk kind of pregnancy. The uterus can rupture because the uterus has got a scar, and also it is better if a person is going through pregnancy or fertility treatment not to do any of this uterus sparing conservative surgeries. There are some women who, though they do not want to get pregnant, still want to keep their uterus. In such cases, this uterus sparing conservative surgeries can be done. So, consideration in art, what can we do? One thing that we can do is to give GnRH analog therapy before IVF. This GnRH analog therapy, what does it do? It creates a kind of a menopausal picture. So, it means that for every, say for about 2 to 6 months, there will be no periods, and then what happens is the lining of the uterus becomes almost atrophic. The only thing which is a side effect with this GnRH analog therapy is that the woman feels menopausal symptoms, flushings, there could be a little bit of bone loss in these cases. So, add back therapy with calcium is required, and then after that is done, then they can go in for stimulation and then collect the eggs and then go in for the procedure of assisted reproduction. What could be the stimulation protocol here? One would look for a long GnRH analog stimulation protocol in these cases. The other thing would be to do a two-staged in vitro fertilization, which means that I would go ahead and do a long protocol, collect all the eggs in the first part of the cycle, then let go of that cycle, and then in a couple of cycles later go in for a frozen embryo transfer cycle, where I will only prepare the lining of the uterus and then go ahead and transfer. and before the transfer, I would like to do a mock embryo transfer. The reason I would like to do a mock embryo transfer is because of the asymmetrical thickness of the myometrium between the anterior and the posterior walls. There is always the direction in which the transfer catheter will go. One has to prepare ourselves so that it will be atraumatic. So, you do a mock transfer in a previous cycle, make sure that you have got your directions correct, and then in the next cycle, which is the cycle in which you want to transfer the embryo, you will put it very easily and atraumatically, and hopefully the pregnancy will occur. So, if you look in consideration of adenomyosis in ART, look at single embryo transfer, look at a hormone replacement therapy protocol in an FET cycle, and uterine contractility and atosiban therapy is very important. Atosiban is nothing but a sympathomimetic which will help to decrease the contractility of the uterus, thereby keeping the uterus quiescent while the catheter is inside the uterus. Very, very important. Make sure while you have your catheter in the uterus, look for contractions. If there are no contractions, that would be the best. If there are contractions, you will have to wait. Make sure that atosiban is given, and of course, when you put in blastocyst, put in a single blastocyst, because we do not want any kind of blastocyst or anything getting in and giving them multiple pregnancy, because the uterus itself will be able to take a singleton pregnancy. There will be more complications when you have multiple pregnancies, particularly in adenomyosis. Our understanding of adenomyosis is complicated by several factors, including a variable clinical presentation, frequent occurrence with other gynecological pathologies, and ongoing debate with respect to the cellular and molecular origins of the disease. The development of non-invasive diagnosis tools like ultrasound and MRI has made it possible for an accurate diagnosis of the adenomyosis without any surgical intervention, but still uniform diagnosis criteria is lacking. Management of women with adenomyosis associated subfertility is highly controversial, and there remains an overall lack of consensus regarding the value of conservative surgery and or medical management to improve the reproductive outcomes. Reproductive surgeons should be cognizant to balance maximal cytoreduction while also conserving adequate uterine tissue to minimize the risk of adverse pregnancy outcomes. Patients with diffuse adenomyosis may be an increased risk of antepartum or intrapartum uterine rupture after cytoreductive surgery compared with patients with focal adenomyosis after adenomyomectomy. However, the overall risk of uterine rupture is unknown and requires further study. Patients with adenomyosis are at risk for adverse perinatal outcomes, including preterm birth, preterm rupture of membranes, and postpartum hemorrhage and spontaneous miscarriage. Now you know, my friends, that when you have adenomyosis, there is no single diagnosis or single treatment to suit everybody. Diagnosis and treatment has to be individualized as the patient comes in. So, one has to understand that you could not have treated a person with surgery and the next person again with surgery, and then you tell yourself, okay, then I am going to do this. You will have to take the person as a whole, ask the person what they want, look at her needs, and then to be able to answer what we can do for her. Because these people are very distressed, very frustrated, so therefore empathy must be shown to them, and we must be very, very supportive in their diagnosis. As long as this is not going to be way out from what we are thinking, I think we should allow a little bit of cooling period when we are actually going to talk to them of any kind of surgical procedures. We have seen a lot of people who come to us almost suicidal. So therefore, with adenomyosis, there have been few treatments that have helped. So suppose, for example, oral contraceptive pills do not help after a period of 6 months, then one can try aromatase inhibitors, they can try Dynogest, or they can try other combination therapies. So don't give up, and please understand this woman is crying for help. So I need your support to be very sympathetic to these people and to help them to live a quality life. So my dear friends, the quality of life is more important than life itself. Thank you very much.